Measuring correctly is important. You probably have tried making something out of wood or fabric or paper, but measured incorrectly as you were cutting the material, and the result was a flop. I have the hard way learned the lesson that carpenters like to quote, "Measure twice, cut once." My most costly error in measuring correctly actually came from a fishing trip. When Luke was in middle school, he and I went fishing one Saturday morning at Berlin Reservoir. We had caught some walleye the previous week, and so we went back. There was a 15-inch length minimum on the fish at that time at that lake. And when I got to the bait shop, I realized I had failed to bring something to measure our catch. So I took a rope stringer into the bait shop and found a ruler, and I measured off 15 inches on the rope stringer, and I tied a knot in it to be my measuring device for our catch. I was unaware, apparently, that as I tightened the knot, it had slipped, and I failed to recheck it for accuracy. We caught one walleye that morning, and it just barely made the knot. I kept it. As we boated into the ramp, a game warden was on shore. He asked to see our catch. I pulled it out of the cooler and showed it to him, and it suddenly looked smaller than I had thought. He measured it, and it was short of the 15-inch minimum. He asked me how I had measured it. I told him the story, and he fined me $65. And so, for Father's Day that year, Luke bought me a vinyl adhesive ruler device that you can put on your boat, adhesive there, and that would stick on and stay, and it was permanent, and I would never have that problem again. Apparently, I'm not the only fisherman that has had some difficulty with this problem of remembering to bring a measuring device for your catch. Here's a picture of a creative way one fisherman has tried to solve that problem. But as we age, don't we shrink in length and height, and doesn't our skin wrinkle and sag? I just am not convinced that can remain a reliable measuring device for very long. Now, here's a picture of another guy who apparently was hoping to catch larger fish than the first one. Good luck ice fishing with that setup. I don't know how that would work. Jesus once told a parable to teach us to measure correctly. He taught us how to measure our life. Let's read that parable in Luke 12, verses 13 through 21. This is the setup of the parable. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." And so as Jesus was teaching one day, someone called out to the crowd, "Teacher, help me with this family inheritance squabble we're having." Now, by Jewish law of that time, the oldest son received 2/3 of the estate when the parents passed away, and the remainder of the estate was divided among the remaining sons. Daughters were expected to share in the inheritance of their father's or their husband's family. Now, this was not an equitable arrangement by our way of viewing things, and many didn't consider it equitable then, except maybe if you were the older son, and then it made perfect sense to you. And so this younger son asked Jesus to tell his brother to be fair. But Jesus was not about to be involved in this dispute. He replied, "Who made me the executor of your family estate?" And then Jesus addressed the problem that these kinds of conflicts usually signify. Let's read verse 15 again in the New Living Translation. "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." And so, as we see, in fact, Jesus did address this dispute and offered advice which would help to settle it by teaching the danger of greedy desires and by teaching us how to measure life. The worldly measurement for life, how well it's lived, and how well you are received, is based primarily on things like success and achievement. Americans especially have rich, full values as Jesus described them in the telling of this parable of the rich fool. We believe that success and money and owning things measures our value and demonstrates our significance in society. Did you know that 70% of us go to the mall weekly, while only 37% of us go to church weekly? Doesn't that tell us something about our society? We are a materialistic people who value the material over the spiritual. Are you familiar with the term affluenza? Affluenza. It's a recently recognized psychological disorder. Webster's dictionary defines it this way: extreme materialism and consumerism associated with the pursuit of wealth and success. And then Webster's goes on to say that affluenza results in a life of chronic dissatisfaction, debt, overwork, stress, and impaired relationships. In other words, our desire for more things, our desire for greater success leads us down the wrong roads. The dictionary then went on to say, affluenza is particularly rampant in the United States, which places a high priority on financial success and material possessions. A love for wealth leads us to clouded judgment and distorted standards. And we love wealth. We will spend big on luxuries for ourselves. Here's just one example, and we could cite many others. According to the latest statistics I was able to find, we as a nation of people spend $100 billion annually following our favorite professional sports teams. That money is spent on tickets and memorabilia and traveling to games and eating at restaurants before or after the games and buying sports packages for our TVs and having watch parties and several other things as well. Now, these statistics appeared before sports betting became legal in a lot of places. Now that we see DraftKings commercials all over TV, I think that $100 billion annually spent is going to go up. We, in spending all of that money, are supporting an industry which provides no real value to our society. I know this is not a wise sermon topic for Super Bowl Sunday, but it is a timely one. In the spending of all of those hundreds of billions of dollars, athletes' salaries have climbed ever higher into the stratosphere of unimaginable amounts of money. The salaries of some athletes have long ago crossed over the ridiculous and into the obscene. Are you aware that the contracts of our top 20 salaried professional athletes is larger than the national economy of the 38 smallest nations in our world? Nations like Martinique and Samoa and Virgin Islands and Grenada. Even the average players in our major professional sports in the United States make multiple millions of dollars each year. Who needs that much money? And why will they seek more in their next contract talks? How much is enough? Greed answers that question with one word: more. That's what the rich fool in Jesus' parable wanted: more. And it was his downfall. And it will be ours as well, for we will find ourselves working for and valuing that which does not last. That's why Jesus said that's foolish. He said that's not what life is all about. The worldly measurement of achievement and success is not the standard that we should use. God's measurement standard is spiritual values. And so we must fight the temptation that more places on us. That's what Jesus advised, is what he taught in this parable. He said, guard against every kind of greed. Every kind. Does that mean there's more than one kind of greed? I think there is. I think we can be greedy for money and things like the main character in Jesus' parable, but we can also be greedy for recognition and praise and prominence and status. When this rich farmer decided to tear down his old barns and build bigger ones, that wasn't just about the accumulation of more wealth. That was also erecting status symbols for himself that he could proudly display for all to see, so they would know how significant he was. You see, it's not just desire that drives us to pursue more. It's also vanity, ego. We can break that hold of the temptation of more on our hearts by first of all remembering that a person's worth is not measured by what he owns or how much he makes or what his title is. Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson is one of those top 20 salaried athletes I referred to. When he signed his contract at the time, it was record-breaking. $230 million. He is paid like he is more important than the rest of us because he's expected to take the Browns to a championship. And in the process of making that record-breaking contract with him, the team was so intent on getting what they wanted out of him that they were willing to overlook his terrible character flaws. And doesn't that tell us something about where we are as a nation? It has become the American way to put success ahead of character and to support decadent greed and to measure a person's worth in dollars. Remember Jesus' words. Beware. Guard against greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. Jesus teaches us a second way we can break that temptation, that hold, that more, the desire for more seems to have on us. And he taught that it's by giving generously. And that makes sense on one level, doesn't it? If something is a temptation to you, just give it away so it's no longer a temptation to you. That may be a little bit of a simplistic statement about what Jesus taught, but he did refer to that kind of an idea in verse 21, as we saw. This is how it will be for those whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich toward God. What did he mean by that phrase, not rich toward God? It refers to people who cut God out of their financial picture. They're wealthy enough to pay all of their bills and to buy a car right off of the lot and to easily purchase a new home. Anything they want, they can get, but they don't include God in their financial planning. They don't tithe. Maybe they don't even give on a regular basis. They spend their money on themselves but are not generous toward God. Generosity is one of the best ways to break the hold that possessions have on us. Don't just give away your pennies. Occasionally, give away a treasure. The pain you will feel when you do so will be in direct proportion to the attachment that thing has to you. And so maybe it's good advice for us to give until it hurts. Because when we do that, the pain that we feel is the pain of tearing something away from us that we shouldn't be so attached to in the first place. And we do tend to become attached to material things. That was the sin of the rich fool in Jesus' parable. It wasn't his wealth. It was what he treasured. That phrase that Jesus used, not rich toward God, in the Greek language, it literally can be translated this way: does not treasure God. And that describes this rich individual. He treasured something, but it wasn't God. Let's read verse 21 again. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. The key word in that sentence is the conjunction. For Jesus is contrasting two different worldviews: those who store up things for themselves and those who are rich toward God. The rich fool in this parable actually was one who chose that first worldview for himself. He stored up things for himself and was not rich toward God. We can be rich toward God by being generous with our finances. It is a spiritual value for us to use our money to help others. And it is a spiritual value for us to use our money to help build God's kingdom. This prosperous farmer did neither of those things. He kept it all to benefit himself. And as a result, he lost it all. And he lost his soul in the process. If God had been his treasure, then instead of boasting, I have all that I need to eat everything I want and to party life away for many years to come, instead of boasting that, if God had been his treasure, he might have prayed something like this: God, everything I have was graciously given me by you. I don't need a bigger safety net. I don't need better food or bigger parties. You are my treasure. I want to be a blessing to others as you have been to me. He knew the value of that kind of a viewpoint. He understood what scriptures taught, being a good Jewish man. He knew what Proverbs 11:25 said: a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. But he ignored that spiritual principle and chose to focus his attention and his desires on the worldly. In the teaching of this parable, Jesus teaches us what to treasure. He tried to teach the same thing when he spoke these words in Matthew 6, beginning in verse 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Theologian John Piper, commenting on this scripture, said, the movement of our money expresses the movement of our heart. That is so true. Where we move our money tells us where our heart is. We will not move our money out of our wallet or out of our bank account for something that we care little about. We will only move our money for something which really appeals to us. How we use our money, therefore, expresses what our treasure is and where our heart is. Here is a wise truth about life, a truth this rich fool did not learn. Spiritual contentment, close relationships, good health, and enjoyable experiences will do more to bring satisfaction and overall happiness into our lives than all the money we could accumulate. And we don't need a lot of money to have any of those four values. I did a little internet surfing this past week to discover what people consider the top priorities or values of life. I wanted to discover if there's any kind of a universal consensus to this question, and there seems to be. The top three answers, which kept popping up on lists composed by experts and amateur alike in various order, were these: life purpose, good health, strong family and friend relationships. Those are the top three values about which life is defined, what gives what life is about. These are the top three things we should pursue. They eclipse all other priorities. Now, as Christians, we would identify our life purpose with what God's will is for us, and so our list might look something like this: our relationship with God in good health and strong family and friend relationships. And anything else is a distant fourth. Measure your life by spiritual values. Many people would likely trade places with Englishman Cecil Rhodes if they could, for he was wealthy beyond description. Through several shrewd business dealings, he made a fortune on diamond and gold mines in Africa in the early 20th century. And in fact, he rose to such prominence on that continent that they named one of their nations after him, Rhodesia. The name was later changed in 1979 to Zimbabwe, but originally it was named after him, Cecil Rhodes. He was proof that you can have it all. Or was he? He never married. He said that he sacrificed having a family so he could dedicate his time to building an empire. And in that pursuit of building an empire, he also sacrificed his Christian values. He knew better. His father had been an Anglican priest. He was raised in a home in which the teachings of the gospel were prominent. But he lost his way chasing after fortune and fame. And as he lay on his deathbed, he expressed regret about that. He said, "Diamonds, gold, and land are mine, but now I leave them all. Not a thing I have gained can be taken with me. I did not seek eternal treasures, and I actually have nothing at all." His sad confession reminds us, no matter how much money or status we accumulate during our years on this earth, we will leave this life without it. That's why Jesus said valuing those things is foolish. If you are going to strongly desire something, desire a deeper faith. Desire to be more in the center of God's will. Desire more quality time with your family. Those are the things you can take into eternity. God's will for us is to follow him in the right path. The right path because it provides a better life for us, a better philosophy of life, a better way to live life. But the right path more so because it leads the right direction. God is simply teaching us spiritual values because he wants us to be a part of an eternal spiritual kingdom. He wants you to be a part of that eternal spiritual kingdom. And he sent Jesus to die on a cross to be your Savior so that kingdom could be yours as well. And so this morning he offers the invitation for you to accept Jesus as your Lord and as your Savior. And if you'd like to make that acquisition, then we invite you to come forward as we stand and sing our invitation hymn.